Hi, Salam, and welcome back to part two of our mini series. To continue to discuss what it means to set boundaries and all about self love. If you haven't already listened to part one, you may want to check it out to hear our thoughts and the beginning of one crazy story.
So I had the courage to do that, thankfully. Alhamdulillah. And I
Alhamdulillah.
basically found him one day. So this was like a week out. So this took about a week for me to get the courage to go say something. He did the thing by the cooler, and then I'm like, oh my God, this is not working. So it was 1 week later, and I'm like, all right, boss, I'm coming in and I'm gonna come in hot, right? So I wait for him to be kind of outside on his own. And I let my supervisor know, I'm like, hey, you know what? What you said didn't work out. He still made some inappropriate comments, but I'm gonna take this up in my own hands. I'm gonna go say something to him. I go outside, I find this guy, and I'm like, hey, man, listen, I got to talk to you about something. You've been making me extremely uncomfortable with your comments. They've been very inappropriate. You asking me if I had a boyfriend or if I've been kissed by someone. You don't ask that to someone in my age, dude. I'm too young, man. You're 65 years old, and it's not something appropriate to be telling anybody. And so he got so embarrassed, and it came out of nowhere that he couldn't make eye contact with me. And it was
Yeah.
great. And it was so good because I wanted him to feel so bad
Little
that he
and
would never do it
embarrassed.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he was like, oh, I'm so sorry that I made you feel uncomfortable. I had no idea. And he was like, I just want to make you guys feel good about yourselves when I come in and talk to you like that. I'm
Okay.
like, well, I'm like, I understand that you saying to a girl that she looks beautiful or she looks really nice. I get that, but that's not how you make anybody, no woman feels comfortable when a guy your age tells them that.
Sounds like
Okay. So
BS, but yeah.
it is BS. I
Yeah.
know. I'm like, no girl would feel comfortable with a 65-year-old man saying that she looks really beautiful in a skirt or really beautiful in that shirt.
Even if she was his age, you shouldn't be asking
I
and,
know you
and
shouldn't be
these sort
saying
of
that kind of
questions
stuff.
or saying those sort of comments. It's inappropriate. You just don't. Like saying,
Exactly.
I wish my wife was like that. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
What are you
So I
playing at?
told him, I know. And I told him, I'm like, okay, if you want to make it like a girl that, feel good about herself, comment about her work ethic. Comment about how great of a job she's doing. You know what I mean? Comment about the products that she's been producing at the job.
Mm.
Don't be commenting about her physicality and how she looks. You think that that's something that a girl wants to hear? You think anyone wants to hear that? So here's that. He's like, I'm so sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, yeah, I had my supervisor come here and talk to you a lot, like the couple last week or so, and it clearly didn't do anything. Like it didn't help. So I felt like I needed to come here and address you directly, though I didn't want to do this, but I feel like there was no choice. I hadn't, to do anything. So I'm like, I had to just come and confront you and make it obvious that you knew that I'm the one that felt uncomfortable. And he's like, yeah, yeah, she did come and speak to me. And, I stopped after that. I'm like, you did not stop. You came and you asked me if I wanted to go have breakfast with you and then you wished your wife was like me. You think that's something I want to hear? No. So if you could just please watch the way that you use it, if you could just watch your language around me and watch what you say to me, I'd much appreciate it because you've just been making me extremely uncomfortable. And he was so embarrassed. I felt so good about myself. Let me just say, I fed
Oh,
myself
you
a
go,
big piece of
girl.
cake. I ate a big piece
Well
of cake that
deserved.
day.
What cake did
Yeah.
you have?
It was a chocolate cake. It was so
Nice.
good.
Oh,
Yeah. So then I left. And what was really great, it was the other thing that I was like really proud about myself was not that I just confronted this guy and set a boundary with him. It was that I didn't say sorry throughout the entire of me confronting him.
good.
And I also didn't like laugh. And I have a nervous laughter. I didn't laugh nervously
Oh,
at all.
yeah.
It was great. I was like, this is so empowering. Like when you set a boundary, it's extremely empowering. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
So I set that boundary and I'm like, thank you so much for understanding. And I'm happy you took that well. And after that, he stopped bothering me. It's been a couple of weeks now.
Alhamdulillah.
And
Yeah.
when I do see him, he's just a simple hello. How are you doing? And he just leaves me alone. And it's
احترم
great.
نفسه.
Yeah. يحترم
He's
نفسه, dude.
respecting himself now. You put some respect in
Yeah.
him.
Dude,
Wow.
respect himself and respect me, damn it.
Yeah,
Like, dude, what is
absolutely.
going
Of
on
course.
with you, man?
Wow.
So I've come to learn how vital boundaries have become. Like they have become something that now I'm being critical about all relationships that I have and like where I could set boundaries or where I'm overextending.
Yeah.
Now the thing with family though, I know there's like a limitation there, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you could set this kind of boundary with them, but at the end of the day, it's like a lot of times they kind of lean on you as
They
like their
do.
source
They
of
do.
they kind of like you're their go-to and you've been their go-to. And so sometimes you're kind of that strength in their wall to lean on. And so in some capacity, it's not always like black and white thing of
It's
like, oh
not.
no, you got to cut that off.
Mm.
But like, if anything, with the friendships you have, or like in the workplace that you work at, or like situations where maybe you're at, like, as literally as small as being at a restaurant and someone gets your order wrong, like to be able to get up and be like, hey dude, you actually got my order wrong, could you fix this? You know what I mean? So it's
Absolutely.
like, it's life changing. The
I
boundary
bet it
setting has
is.
been life changing, y'all. It's
I'm
great.
I'm so proud of you. Honestly, this is
Yeah.
like you've
Hmm.
recognized what you needed to do and you've just found that strength, that inner strength, and you've just dealt with it. You've asked somebody else to kind of,
Yeah.
step in and that didn't work. And
Yeah.
you're like, nope, you know what? I'm just going to take control of the situation and put what I've learned into practice and just,
Exactly.
face it basically. So
Hmm.
mashallah, you should have another chocolate cake.
I know. I'm probably gonna get another piece this time, dude, because it was just crazy when
Yeah.
it was crazy reading. It was just like, subhanAllah, I feel like lessons come at the right time. And it's
Yes.
crazy at 27 years old, this is when I learned about what boundaries are.
But
And it's crazy,
it's not a
like,
bad thing. It's not, look,
mhm,
everything that we learn in life is just part of our own sort of process and our own path. And
yeah,
we're all going, trying to go through into the same direction, but we're probably taking different paths to get there. It doesn't
exactly.
necessarily mean this person's path and what they're doing is better than what you're doing or vice versa. You just have
Hmm.
to go through that process. You can't,
Yeah.
compare your whatever you've achieved and what you've learned to what somebody else has done, etc. It doesn't really work like that. Allah's plan is just, you have to go through these things at whatever time He thinks is right for you. It could be when you're
Yeah. God is the
20,
best planner, man.
you could be 70 and you could still be learning. And that's just part of life. I've always said
Yeah.
that the time you'll stop learning is probably when you die. And
When
even
you're
then,
dead.
there's an argument to say, well, actually, you know, that is not the end, is it, for us Muslims?
That's
So,
true. That's true.
yeah, no, I'm very, very proud of you. And like you say, I think with family, it's not as black and white. And I think we touched up on this
Hmm.
before,
I
but we'll
think we
probably
did
just
a tad,
recap.
right?
Yeah, a tad,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, with family, it's not black and white. Obviously, you have to step up and help them and so on. And it can be deemed as an act of charity as well. But at the same time, in order for you to be there in the long run for them, you have to also be mentally healthy and, okay. Because if you
Hmm.
burn yourself out too much, you're not going to be good for anybody, not
100%.
even yourself,
100%.
you're just going to
Yeah.
be completely burnt out and just incapable of doing anything. So you have to
Yeah.
kind of recognize, okay, like in this situation, okay, it's not a big deal. My family, I need to be there, do whatever. You sort of, drop those walls a little bit and you kind of accommodate, like you say. And then obviously in other scenarios where you think actually it's not a priority, they can do this without me. They can, mom and dad are having issues with the
Exactly.
computer. We'll let the
Yeah, like they'll deal
somebody
with that
else deal with
later.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not the end of the world, right?
Yeah,
Um,
and I know for sure, like, a lot of times, like the load of like the family burden, a lot of times it does fall on like a couple of kids in the family. It's never all of them equally. It's always like one or two kids that deal with
I wish it was
all of it.
equal. I wish it
I
was.
know, no, but it never
Yeah,
is, right? And it's usually
no.
like when that happens, like the person that's most burdened, they feel like they have to do this because if they don't do it, then no one else is going to do it. You know what I mean? And
You feel
so,
like you've let them down and you've kind of
mhm.
failed at being there for them, sort of thing.
Well, also, like, I feel like, I don't know if this is like with your family, but I've seen this in other families where like it does get burden on one kid.
Mm.
But sometimes it's like that burden, it's not just from the parents, it's also from the siblings asking and requesting. But the interesting thing that I know we're both putting our hands up.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that it's interesting because like the burden of the parents, like if you don't meet the parents' needs, right? And like say that the parents are kind of manipulative in the sense that they'll go to another sibling and be like, oh, this kid hasn't been helping me out with these things, and I don't know what's going on with them. They're being selfish, they don't want to help. And like that kid will get mad at you, the person that's most been burdened, like doing all of the work, and be like, why aren't you meeting the needs of your parents? And I'm like, you've not been in the picture for the longest time.
Yeah.
You don't even help around the house. So I don't know why you're talking.
Can you
So it's
please like step
interesting.
up a little bit and maybe just
Yeah.
fill in the gaps a little bit when I'm not around, sort of thing. But like you say, I
Yeah.
think when they've got that one of the siblings where the parents look at just one of them or possibly two in certain
Yeah.
situations and they know that that person is their go-to. So whatever little or large issue or problem or whatever, it's coming your way, sort of thing. And I feel like when they do ask the other siblings, they haven't really got the mental sort of not capacity, but they just it's new to them. It's alien. They're like, oh, what are you asking me for? Why don't you go to you go to? You know, they'll sort it out for you, sort of thing. Like you say, yeah, it does come back, and they're mad at you, and you just think, how dare you? You have no
Yeah.
authority to, you have no
Yeah.
feet to stand on to be angry. You have no right. But
Exactly.
it's
And it's
just
like they
family, isn't it?
dismiss all the things that you do, and it's kind of like an entitlement thing. So the thing I think I'm trying to get at is like boundaries with families is obviously a tough thing to do because like that's just kind of like the closest like connection that you have with anybody. Um, but I think that there is still that potential and opportunity to set boundaries with your siblings. Now, maybe you're handling all the, I feel like we're jumping in conversation, but it's fine. This is just how we work, I guess.
It's just the
But
way
I
we are.
think, yeah, it's how we are. So the thing with boundaries is like with family, it's like, yes, maybe you're not able to set that boundary with your parents. Maybe there is like certain needs that they need help with that like you're just been the go-to and it's just easier for you to handle it than to like throw it on someone else. But I think like boundaries with your siblings is something that there is like kind of that potential that you can set where you can probably unload some of that burden that a lot of times your parents throw onto you.
Mm.
And I am talking generally about middle kids, talking about generally middle kids, but it could be any sibling in the family.
Yeah.
But I mean, like setting boundaries with your siblings where, like, okay, if your mother or your dad are always coming to you about specific things and like, or about everything, right? About any need they have, they come right to you. You're the person they go to. And it's like, dude, I can't handle all of this. Like, I have already my own things to deal with. I have other things to deal with. And I've been helping nonstop. Like, I don't even have time for myself. That's where I think you can start setting that boundary where you unload some of that burden and start just delegating it to other siblings and being like, hey, yo, you don't help out around a lot. You got to help out with this. Go deal with this thing because I'm not doing it. So
And
I
it can
think
be
like,
done in a positive way as well. It
of
doesn't need
course,
to
yeah, I know
be.
I'm coming off so
Yeah, yeah.
aggressive, but
I
yeah, you
totally
can.
get it. No, no, I totally get it. Because
Yeah.
I say this because I've recently had a talk with my youngest sibling, and I've tried
Mm-hmm,
to get her to sort of step up and get involved and do certain
mm-hmm,
things. Because my
mm-hmm,
situation is a bit different. I'm like living alone and stuff. I'll probably chop
mm-hmm,
this bit out, but
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah. So yeah, so I've had the chat with the younger sibling, and I've said, hey, you need to help out a little bit more because I am burnt out, or work is going absolutely crazy, or something has come up. And it's all about explaining to them. I think when you communicate with them and you're very openly say, look, I'm very burnt out, I need help here,
Mm-hmm.
and explain it in such a way that they kind of get it rather than being angry with them, which is so easy to do. I've been there,
Yeah.
honestly. I've been there with my siblings where I've been angry and I've just sort of
Gone
um
off.
yeah, gone off and just blame them, like, why are you not helping, why are you not doing this, why are you not
Mm-hmm,
doing that.
mm-hmm,
It doesn't get you anywhere. So I think, and every sibling you speak to, you have to approach them, in a way where they sort of get it, and it's in
mm-hmm,
line with their character and the way they process things.
mm-hmm.
So like with the youngest, going down to the Gen Z sort of generation,
Yeah.
and in explaining it in that sort of way. But yeah.
So show them some memes and some
Oh
YouTube
God,
videos.
yes, memes. Oh, they live on memes.
They do. No, but for sure, I feel like I know like a lot of times people when you say boundaries are like, oh, ew, that's such a white Americanized mentality to have. And it's like, no,
Selfish.
dude, it's not. It's like
Mhm.
you need to have standards in your life. You set standards just like you set standards at work and expectations at work, you got to set some standards for yourself. And
Mhm.
so like if someone is pulling too much from you, well, at some point you're gonna pop. And so like how do you address that concern and get to a point where you're not constantly in a cycle of burnout and then you get angry, resentful, and then it's just like this non-constant cycle that's toxic in itself. And
Absolutely.
so like when someone tells you like, oh, having boundaries is so white or it's so Americanized or it's so whatever, it's so Western,
Mhm.
it's like, well, the response is like, I guess like you don't really like yourself because then it seems like you just allow anyone to do whatever they want with you. Because when you don't have boundaries, you're saying like, oh yeah, dude, say whatever you want, do whatever you want. I don't really care. Like nothing really hurts me or doesn't mean anything to me.
It could be
And it's
the
like
lack of
that.
understanding of the term as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think like the understanding of what a boundary is, I think the understanding that a lot of folks have is more of the Western idea of it,
Mm.
of like, I mean, especially kids with their parents in some ways where they're just like, Mom, leave me alone. And they're like, go upstairs and like close the door. Like this sense of like having too much privacy. You know how like privacy too is
Yes.
seen as like a Western thing.
Mm.
It's like a luxury that like a lot of people of color don't have.
Yeah.
And so it's like the idea of like having privacy or boundaries or like restrictions with certain people. It's kind of like, why would you have that? Ew, like don't do that.
What's wrong
That's
with
not
you?
cool. What's wrong with you? Like, why
Yeah.
did you do that? But it's like those are things that we need to have conversations about because I feel like they're essential to like your mental health in so many ways. And like the idea of self-worth and self-love too. Right? Like if I'm
Absolutely.
allowing someone to say or do what they want to me and I'm not doing anything to kind of put a boundary or stop it, then it's like how much do you even like value yourself or love yourself?
Mm.
So I say go get the book, y'all. Go get the book, read about
I
what it
need to get it.
is.
I think you
You
mentioned
really
it last
should.
time we spoke. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
have
yeah,
a chance
yeah.
to check it out. Definitely gonna check it out, inshallah.
Set
For sure.
Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra Tawwab. Even if you don't like reading a book, there's a lot of podcasts out there about what boundaries are. Like, please go learn about what boundaries are because you'll come to realize if you've never learned about what boundaries are, there's been probably so many instances where you've been in situations where relationships have been so toxic because of the lack of boundaries. Even in the search process, like, let's just talk a little bit about that. Like, in the search process, a lot of times folks end up feeling burnt out, they feel exhausted, they feel resentful, they feel angry, they feel frustrated. Yeah, in some ways it is the process and the avenue in which you're using it, which I know a lot of it now is like more the online route,
Yeah.
but it's also because of your lack of setting boundaries with yourself,
Mm.
right? Or like the conversations you've been having, like the standards you set with people that you talk to, right? Just like from, my own personal experience, there have been instances where I was like, dude, why did I let something go on for 6 months? And I allowed a guy to speak to me
Yeah.
in certain ways that was inappropriate. It was wrong. It's like because I didn't set boundaries.
Yeah. So he thought it's acceptable to keep pushing and basically doing whatever and saying
Mhm.
whatever and getting away with it.
Mhm.
And we've all been there, Sophia. We all
Yeah.
have, and where we've not really recognized that we need to set those boundaries, especially from the beginning. I think it's so important, timing
Mm.
wise. You have to do it right from the beginning, and it doesn't need to be in an intimidating way. It could just be, for example, they do something that you don't, you feel is inappropriate or you don't quite agree with. You just sort of have to address it right there and then. And if it continues and continues, then obviously there's an issue there. And I'll give you an example. You probably heard this before. So somebody that I was getting to know at the very, very initial sort of stages um, suggested that we meet up, and we did. We met up. And he was doing something which I didn't really recognize as a huge sort of red flag or an issue or a boundary problem or whatever. And it was sort of tapping me on my shoulder to try and get my attention. Yeah, you've been there. You're nodding.
Yeah,
You've
I've
been
been
there
there
as well.
before too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. And it took me a second, but I have to say, I did address it right there and then. I said to him, yeah,
Amazing.
I did. And I said it in a very, very sort of normal way. I just sort of smiled and I said, yeah, don't do that. Don't touch me, in a very sort of
Go
non-threatening
Taz.
way. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, but then guess what? He did it again.
You violated your boundary.
Yep, he violated my boundary again. And
Mhm.
then the time after that, he only kept apologizing. I'm like, just stop. If you're
Just
gonna
stop doing
just
it.
stop. You don't
Yeah.
have to apologize if you actually stop. I don't like it.
Mhm.
Don't do it.
Mhm.
And he was just sort of testing. And then he was using a water bottle to kind of tap me on the shoulder. It's just, pushing it and pushing it and trying to,
He was using a water
yeah,
bottle to
yeah, a water
test.
bottle
Oh
to try and
my
get my
God.
attention. I'm like, dude, I'm talking right. I'm right next to
Jeez
you. Like I
Louise.
can
Yeah.
see you don't need to
Oh my
tap me.
God.
I'm here. And reflecting on that later, I realized, right, okay, this is a red flag. It might seem like a very minute, small sort of red flag to somebody
Mhm.
else, but to me, it meant that this person was not respecting my boundaries. I explained, like, look, this is my personal space. Don't, just don't.
Don't violate it. Like, don't
Exactly.
violate my personal
And he
space.
didn't respect that. He carried on and then he tried to find other ways to do the same thing. And he was trying
Wow.
to test me out because that's what happens with these people,
Hmm.
sort of toxic traits there. They try and test your boundaries and they push and push and push and see how far you can take it and if you're okay with it, you know?
Exactly.
So you have to
Exactly.
you have to nip it in the bud. You have to try and address it right there and then. And I think when you are learning, it might take you a bit of time. I've been there where it takes me a while to kind of understand, like, oh, I should have said something there or should have done
Hmm.
that. I'll
And
give you
that's
another.
normal.
Yeah, it is not. It's part of the
Yeah.
process. And
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
example, I've mentioned
Hmm.
this again to you before personally. in my last job, I was just working in a very small office, but it was part of a very large office complex, and there were many, many different companies and all sorts of people. And I came across this guy. He was like middle-aged guy. You know, you see people in the corridor, you have to be polite and say morning, whatever, you know,
Of
just
course.
all
Yeah.
that kind of like, you know,
Cordial stuff.
pleasantries. Absolutely, yeah.
Hmm.
And then one time he stopped me and he was like, "Hi, how are you? Oh, I see you around. You know, who do you work for? Blah, blah, blah. What do you do?" And all the rest of it. Just normal chit chat.
Chit chat. Yeah.
Yeah. And then one time I was talking to one of my colleagues during lunch and he kind of came and interrupted. And to be honest with you, I wasn't really listening to what he was saying. I wasn't really all there. I'd said hi and stuff. I wasn't rude. I wasn't ignoring him because at that point he hadn't done anything wrong.
Hmm.
Um, but he sort of said bye and went away. And then I saw him a couple of days later and he seemed very off. I said morning and stuff, and he just looked at me like he was so angry. I was like, damn, you know, what did I do here?
Wow.
I know, very, very strange. And
Hmm.
I was like, hey, are you okay? Like, everything good? Like, how's your family? How's your kids? Whatever. And he was like, I thought we were meeting for coffee yesterday. I was
What?
like, I beg your pardon? And he was like, yeah, we agreed that we were going to go and meet, you know, have coffee in the canteen, like in the same building.
Hmm.
I was like, I don't recall that, but yeah, okay, bye, sort of thing.
Jeez. Yeah. Way
And
to be a
he, you know,
creep.
he just looks so angry, like his
Like he was
veins were
getting red and
popping.
stuff.
His veins were
Wow.
popping in his forehead. He was not happy whatsoever.
Oh
And that
shoot.
was really, really creepy. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah. So I should have addressed it right there and then. Like I should have said, well,
Yeah.
actually, we hadn't agreed, Jack, and I don't know who you are, and you know, saying morning and stuff to you is as far as it's gonna go, and I don't know what you're on about, and just sort of like addressed it right there and then very firmly.
Yeah.
But I didn't, and it was only afterwards that I sort of self-reflected and I thought, oh damn, I should have like questioned him a bit more, or, and you know, just put those boundaries. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Even if you did agree,
Mm.
you could change your mind whenever you want.